What you have before you today is a claim for the release of funds from the mayor's office to secure those funds from the geothermal asset fund to allow the mayor's office to conduct a public health study of up to 3 years to determine if there are health effects on Puna residents that can be linked to geothermal energy development that will focus on effects on central nervous system, respiratory, and anxiety disorder symptom functions. The planning director recommends that the Windward Planning Commission accept the claim adjuster's recommendation and to award $750,000 from the Geothermal Asset Fund to conduct a geothermal public health study as it appears fair, reasonable, and appropriate to the description of the claim and will benefit a majority of Puna residents most directly affected.
For testimony, I'll bring up 4 at a time.
I remember when the asset fund was formed, and the primary purpose of the fund was to, quote, mitigate negative impacts from geothermal development, unquote. But it never stated what those negative impacts were.
For all you folks here, you know, when I first moved here, I thought geothermal was wonderful. It was great. And I went for 7 years, I still believed it was great. My son used to ride home on the school bus and get poisoned on the way home, and I didn't know he was getting poisoned. The health department said everything was fine. Don't worry about a thing. So comes the blowout. Boom, the light goes on for Jeffrey. Jeffrey goes out and gets an education and finds out that the health department had been lying to us. And I'll call any one of them to their face liars. I don't care who they are. We were not told the truth.
During the 1991 blowout, we were severely impacted. I called the police department at 8 o'clock in the morning because I woke up to hearing a roar, and I was exhibiting, I didn't know it at the time, classic hydrogen sulfide serious symptoms. And when I called the police department, they said they have a small problem at PGV and hung up in my ear. The way the wind blows, when PGV, Puna Geothermal Venture, was venting, exploding, well cleanouts, thank you, etc., the wind would blow it down the coast and drop it right on top of Seaview, drop it right on top of Opihikau. We were more seriously impacted there than we are now at the top of Leilani Estates, where the top, meaning the top of the hill, Leilani is a hill. The money for this health study must be appropriated because we are overdue to be recognized as being seriously impacted, not just by uncontrolled releases, ventings, well cleanouts. We are being impacted and have been impacted for many decades now by long-term, low-level hydrogen sulfide poisoning.
You know, up until 2.5 years ago, I didn't really notice that many effects from the plant, but that was when they began their last drilling that they did for 120 days. And, you know, the first thing you notice when they start that is a vibration at night. And you're in bed with, well, in my case, I'm in bed with my wife. And when I felt that vibration, it is quite disturbing. And when it goes on for 120 days, I would say that there were psychological stresses that I experienced. And I'd imagine other folks who live closer than that do as well.
We are now actually being threatened by more geothermal development. We do not have any base studies, either on the quality of our land, our water, our air, nothing. We have people living on catchment. Our water supply can be threatened by these discharges from the plant, these toxic discharges. We've had the recent blowout again, 3rd time in 3 years, that people have been negatively affected. The state, nor the county, nor even the EPA has ever come down and truly done anything to investigate our concerns.
The night of August 7th, when Isel hit, it was approximately about 7:30 as I reviewed my text messages to a buddy down the block we were keeping in touch with. I texted him and said, hey, geothermal just blew. Was very concerned at that point. The noise and the stress of just the hurricane coming on top of the geothermal blowout was just absolutely nerve-shattering.
Imagine spending the day preparing for a hurricane, and just when you come inside to take shelter, you are poisoned by H2S and other heavy metals, and you cannot leave due to falling trees. This is what happened to the people who live near PGV that night. My wife, my 75-year-old mother-in-law, and I all became nauseous that evening. That was before we heard the reports of the leak by Civil Defense. We could not leave our farm due to downed trees on the road. We all suffered from headaches and lethargy for the following week.
But with this last blowout, I was in the middle of it. And it sounded like a jet airplane had landed in my backyard. It was so very loud. And I went to investigate the sound. And opening my door, I got a huge blast of all the toxins that they were putting out.
All of a sudden, in the hurricane, these winds are traveling around, who knows how they can track, but I'm smelling the rotten eggs, the typical hydrogen sulfide smell. I also had health effects, scratchy throat, burning eyes, headache. Was told by HPD when I called at 911 that we were aware of it. There's no health safety risk at that time. Later on, I was texted by my buddy, and he says, B97 is releasing a statement that it is an uncontrolled blowout and you should evacuate if you're being affected by the release of the gas. This was almost an absurd thing because there was no way to get out of the, there was no way to leave the area.
And a friend of ours, a young man and his family, were actually told by the fire department on the Long Island Boulevard that, guess what? You can't get out of here because of the fallen trees. The young man, of course, is a trucker and a heavy equipment operator. He had his 3/4-ton truck with his 2-year-old son in the front seat, daughter, excuse me, and he told the fire department, well, guess what? I'm going around. He took his family of 6 up Leilani Boulevard with his chainsawed a path through with his chains, pulled the trees aside, and made a path out.
By 9 o'clock, I was knocked out unconscious. I did not hear any of the storm. I am a mother of 3. Moms, part of our brain sleeps and part of our brains can hear a pin drop. I didn't hear huge trees falling in my driveway.
This is serious. I mean, you know, I've heard of other people that have died during this time.
PGV said that the system worked as designed, and we followed all the permits. And yet, 100 people or more were made sick, including elderly, pregnant women, and children. There's something wrong with the system where people are made sick, and a company says, we followed all the permits. Our system worked as designed.
I mean, we don't even have monitors. The monitors went out. And then one last thing, the monitors went out. They were gone during the storm. Then after the storm, PGV went ahead and they did their clean out with no monitors. And people got gassed again. Driving by that plant, they got poisoned again, and there was no monitors.
PGV, which I've had high regard for over the years, lost a lot of credibility in this most recent issue, particularly in the disparity between the official summary of what happened and what the community actually saw, felt, and smelled and experienced. There's a huge discrepancy. And like every other event, there was no evacuation plan, there was no notification officially to the community. The only thing that was different this time was they did hire a PR firm, and they did put out a much more professional press release of their version of what happened.
And following the advice that we heard at a geothermal meeting of follow-up to the hurricane of people that had some symptoms, we went to the ER room of the Hilo Hospital along with several other people for testing. Tests were conducted, and this was several weeks ago. We've called, and they said they still don't have results for us. Also, they suggested we go to the Pahoa lab the next morning and have urine tests done and sent to a lab. We've checked in on those results both at the lab and at the Puna Bay Clinic, and they say The Puna Bay Clinic said they don't have any record of those tests, and the lab said they were probably lost.
I am not a conspiracy theorist, but I'll tell you something. There is a conspiracy here of big business and some politicians, and we have to cut through it.
Gary Gill, our wonderful clean air branch, said, oh, there's nothing happened out in Puna. Here's the health department guy. The head of the health department goes on TV and in the newspapers and said nothing happened to us. This is what we're up against. Here we have Kay Kilburn, the guy that we wanted as a community to do this study because we know he hasn't been bought and paid for. He's dead.
Dr. Kay Kilburn, who died, it's really strange. He died the night of that blowout on August 7th, but he was in California, and he was top grade in finding hydrogen sulfide poisoned communities and helping them to correct it when industry and politics refused to help them. Kilburn got it done.
I think it's important for you folks to insist that this study have legitimacy, neutrality, objectivity, that it be scientific and not politicized. It's a lot of money to spend, and it's a very important issue. And those things have been lacking in the past.
The adequacy of the funding for a project of this scope and the type of opposition that it is going to meet is going to be substantial. We're taking on the oil and gas industry, the wastewater industry, the meat packing industry, and several other chemical process or manufacturing processes that emit substantial quantities of H2S. I worked with Dr. Legator when he was here as part of his 5 community across the United States epidemiological survey. Dr. Legator was one of the premier epidemiologists in the world at the time that he showed up to do this study. And the kind of flack that he took came all the way from Washington. He completed the study. He is deceased now. This is not going to be a small undertaking. We wouldn't be having this discussion if we lived in Europe. European Union does not allow the kinds of levels that are allowed in the United States in terms of exposure of H2S. It is well understood. Don't be surprised if they come back for more money. They're probably going to need it.
This is 30 years in coming. This community was basically abandoned by state regulatory agencies as well as the County of Hawaii agencies. Basically, the state brought in, hoping to bring in geothermal development on the health, safety, and lives of the people. At the state level, we do not have any protection whatsoever against the excesses of this type of industry whatsoever. We don't even have contested case hearing rights. Those are taken away, I think, in 1997. There's no other industry in the state of Hawaii that has that type of protection against scrutiny from the public.
Geothermal is not clean, it is not green, and it is not renewable. I mean, we want this study to happen. It's fair. We're not an expendable community, folks.
I have been impacted by this Puna geothermal venture for too long. I want it to stop.
We feel like canaries in the coal mine, and we aren't getting gassed. Thank you.